Most people at the Maine State House would probably agree that Maine needs tax reform, but what form that should take is another matter. Joining us in the arena today are Senator Joe Perry of Bangor, the Senate Chair of the Taxation Committee, and Senator Richard Nass of Acton. The focus is a new bill, LD 1088. It's described by backers as a revenue-neutral way of stabilizing revenues and dropping the overall tax burden on most Mainers. It proposes to cut the top income tax rate from 8.5% to 6.5%. To make up for that revenue loss, it would expand the sales tax by removing exemptions on things such as amusements and recreation, repair and maintenance services other than home repair, taxi and limo services, dry cleaning, pet boarding, and so on. Gentlemen, thank you for being here to talk about this today. Presumably, a lot of people are going to balk at the idea of expanding the sales tax for any reason. Senator Perry, how do you respond to that?
Sure. Well, I mean, this is simply an income tax reduction that we need. Our top rate will be reduced by over 20% from 8.5% to 6%. $160 million of income tax reduction, and we will pay for it with expansions in the sales tax. But it is as simple as if I handed you 85 cents, or if you handed me 85 cents and I handed you back $1.60, that's what we're doing 100 million times over. It reduces burden by $75 million on Mainers.
Does this plan make sense, Senator Nass?
It doesn't to me. I understand we worked on this for the past 2 years, but with literally thousands of Mainers losing their jobs every day, we've got a situation where incomes are dropping, with retirement savings being diminished greatly because of the economic conditions in the country. I don't see the advantages on the income side, and these guys are proposing to raise the sales tax. So for many Mainers, it's no reduction in income, sales taxes are up. That doesn't sound like a good deal to me.
Are you able to say to Mainers that everybody, or just about everybody, will see some form of overall reduction?
We've got economic modeling where we look really in depth at that, and we have yet to be able to design a plan where 100% of Mainers will guarantee them a tax decrease. But virtually all Mainers do receive a tax decrease.
How much would the average person benefit, as far as you can tell?
$150 a head, It's that $150 a person. $75 million is the aggregate total. $75 million of burden reduction. That's $75 million that stays in our economy and circulates through the state of Maine.
All right, we're talking about trying to put more burden on out-of-staters, on tourists. Are tourists not paying enough to come here now? And I don't suppose most of them are wealthy, but we don't want to scare them away either.
Yeah, there is a burden transfer in this case. But again, I think we're looking at the situation now with the economy and suggesting that there's going to be a different time or a better time to do this. The other thing, when we did this before, we had corralled all the potential tax increases into one package. We've got in front of us now proposals to raise the tax on heating oil, alcohol, all of which are outside of this thing. So when we talk about our tax package, our citizens in Maine better look at what else is going on in state government, in the legislature, that's going to diminish this benefit.
That's an interesting point. Does this work if all these other proposals should go through, such as a heating oil tax or more on liquor?
Well, every year there's a number of proposals. I mean, there's 2,000 bills. These issues are raised all the time. Our history is we've cut taxes. We rolled the sales tax back from 6% to 5%. We eliminated the snack tax. We eliminated the personal property tax on business equipment. We created the homestead exemption. We doubled the value of the circuit breaker program. We have a history of cutting taxes. This is one more tax cut. It is a tax shift. It does not put us out of sync with what other states are taxing. People come into the state of Maine and enjoy tax breaks here in the state of Maine that they don't enjoy in their own home state. So we're going to bring us a little closer in line with what other states are doing and share all of that money with Mainers. We're going to reduce burden by $75 million.
I think the objection when a similar proposal came up a couple of years ago was that this was rearranging the deck chairs. Rather than revenue neutral, Republicans said we want reduction. Is that still the position?
We do. We think that what we first need to do to demonstrate to the folks in Maine that we can bring the cost of state government down and in line, and then we can do some of these other things. But we're looking at it because there's really a sense of believableness here, I guess, in the sense that how are you going to really believe that because we're proposing to cut your income tax, the legislature isn't going to come back in 2 years and raise the rate again? So it's about trust as much as it is about timing. And so, yes, Republicans still believe we ought to cut the cost of state government.
Do you need Republicans to pass this?
Well, I mean, really, if we're going to get the true message to the public of what we're doing and get buy-in from the public, it would help if both of us, both the Republicans and Democrats, were in it together. I don't know if it's necessary or not. It would be desirable. I mean, I never thought I'd see the day that Democrats were fighting to drop the income tax rate by 20%.
I'm going to have to cut you off there. It's all the time we have for the on-air portion of this week's In the Arena, but we're going to continue the discussion in just a minute online at WCSH6.com and WLBZ2.com, so join us there. Welcome to the online portion of this week's In the Arena discussion. We're talking about tax reform, a new proposal the Democrats are putting forth. We're joined by Senator Joe Perry from Bangor and Senator Richard Nass from Acton. We're talking about the idea, well, first of all, that whether or not this package can pass without Republican support.
Yeah. We want Republican support. And as I was saying before, I never thought I'd see the day that the Democrats would be proposing a 20% reduction in the top income tax rate, lowering burden by $75 million for Mainers, and having to wonder if we can get Republican support. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. We need to position this state for when we come out of this recession. When we come out of this, people are going to enjoy big capital gains, and we're going to drop that rate.
Well, we're talking about little changes, or maybe large changes, but a number of individual changes in the sales tax. Why not expand the sales tax to nearly everything, but lower that rate? Wouldn't that be easier for businesses and consumers to deal with?
We think it was, and that was the nature of the attempt several years ago when the economy was different. This needs to be big and bold. We have citizens out there that just got a tax refund from George Bush in the neighborhood of $600 to $1,200. That was a few months ago. We're now offering them potentially $100. This is, I think, going to be dismissed as, and with some suspicion, that we are providing some kind of benefit, which isn't a real benefit, and we're going to come back in the next session and make up for it. I will tell you the desire for spending in Maine is endless.
Well, that brings up another question. Shouldn't this include some sort of spending control, which a lot of people think is the real problem with Maine's budget?
Right. I mean, if you go back to the beginning of the Baldacci administration, over the past 6 years, all we've done is cut it. We started with a $1.2 billion budget deficit. We're spending $200 million less in this proposed budget than we did in the last budget. That's over a 4-year period. We've really shrunk the size of government. So if anyone says we're not cutting spending, they're not watching what we're doing there. Regardless, moving forward, we can have a more competitive tax code or not. This is a more competitive tax code. It lowers burden by $75 million, and I think that's what the people of Maine want.
What about
there's a great disagreement in this. I mean, Joe's pitch about cutting taxes and cutting spending is not the case if you look at what we've actually spent and what our tax revenue is. We have a $6.2 billion budget. In fact, it's a different story from our standpoint.
What about the idea of a local option sales tax? That doesn't seem to be addressed here, and I know it's something a lot of communities have been interested in for a long time.
Right. I'd be supportive of a local option property tax, local option sales tax used solely for reducing property tax and giving service centers more discretion on where they raise their money and lowering that property tax burden for their residents. We're doing this tax package. That's not part of it. I don't think we can be diverted right now. We need to pass this tax package and then down the road consider some of these other options.
Would a local option sales tax make sense?
We had a version of that. There's the one version out there that I've seen in the last few years that basically says for towns that collect the sales tax, to the extent that it goes up, we think that probably some of that should stay with that town. So that's a version of local option sales that was in the last proposal we did. It's not involved. There's I don't think any reference to it in this one. So
now I would have to ask too. I would think any idea, any talk of increasing sales taxes would not be well received by towns near the New Hampshire border. Is that going to be a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be well received by anyone, but particularly New Hampshire. It is a problem. If you go back to when we were at 6% before we reduced the rate and look at the numbers, I don't think there was much of a difference as far as sales that they noticed an increase or decrease. But the fact is we rolled it back to 5%, and I suspect that's where it's going to stay.
And I live on the New Hampshire border.
Right.
Part of our property is the border. So literally there is no business conducted on the Maine side of the New Hampshire-Maine border. It's all in New Hampshire. And that's sad in a way because you can't compete in being in Maine.
Well, you can't always. I mean, there's no perfect way to address that either, I would think, given the nature of geography.
Again, we really go back to talking about reducing spending so that we can deliver rate increases. Now, are we ever going to get to the point where we don't have a sales tax in Maine? Not likely. So but we're not doing anything about that. We're going the wrong direction.
But is it, for example, you talk about maybe using local option to reduce property taxes. What's the most equitable form of tax if you have to have one? Is it the income tax? Is it a sales tax or some other sort of value-added tax?
That's essentially where we're in agreement. Essentially, all the tax academics will tell you should be not taxing income and spending, should be taxing consumption. That's pretty well established. That's what this plan does. That's what the plan 2 years ago does. We're talking about trust here and believability. When can we do that? I don't think the people in Maine are ready yet. They demonstrated that 2 years ago. They aren't ready to believe in this possibility, and it's not bold enough.
You'll have a lot of people looking for exemptions. I know, for example, the boat builders, the maritime industries, would like some sort of exemption on certain boats. And they say it can be offset by the fact that you'll bring in wealthy out-of-staters to come buy the boats. They'll spend money elsewhere. Is that the sort of thing you'd consider? Well,
we have that bill in front of our committee, and I think it's probably not only a good idea, but perhaps necessary, because that's what happens on the state level. State by state, a state will implement that type of exemption, and if you want to compete, you have to follow suit. And really, the tax base gets squeezed more and more onto you and I. And that is one thing we're looking at in this proposal, broadening the base, making a little more stable revenue source, and lowering that income tax. That's the biggest deterrent we have to attracting wealth and keeping wealthy folks who are paying that top rate, and keeping Maine residents who are splitting time with some other state. We need to make Maine more attractive to be a resident, and that's precisely what we're trying to do with this bill.
Is it at least a good thing that we're going to be having this discussion? I'm not sure how soon it's coming up in committee.
I agree completely. We need to continue this discussion, which we started years ago. We have it almost every 2 years in the tax committee. So the one benefit of this is we're going to continue the discussion. I just don't think folks are ready yet to buy in. It's not a believable, bold enough, big enough change yet. And for people who are losing their jobs, who have lost their retirement income, and are looking at sales tax increases, I don't think so.
Well, ready or not, I want to give them the $75 million.
All right. Senator Richard Nass, Senator Joe Perry, thanks so much for being with us today in the arena. We thank you for joining us as well. We'll see you next time.